We are in Waterloo Place. I am with Lando of Adventures in Historyland, and we are walking in the footsteps of the Duke of Wellington. And I thought we would start here in Clubland, in St. James's and Waterloo Place, in the actual footsteps of the Duke himself. This is the block.
This is the block. This area was frequented by the Duke of Wellington for the majority of his life. It's very close to where he lived at Apsley House. It's very close to Hyde Park. He would take rides every day, and generally speaking, well, he could still ride even to his old age, but that was how he got around. And therefore, when he went to his clubs or visiting clubs, such as this building here, the Athenaeum behind us, he needed a place to get off his horse and get back on his horse. And being as he frequented it so often, he desired that they give him special parking.
So these were put in 1830, and there's one on the other side of the street as well. So we can actually physically go in the steps of the Duke of Wellington.
I'm the page.
You shall be the horse.
I'm the page. Fine. I'm the horse.
Yeah, very good, very good. All right, well,
Noble.
consider yourself dismounted.
Noble.
Yes.
I was going to be the page.
Yeah.
I thought that made more sense. Because the footman would come out of the club and hold the horse,
Yes.
not
and then-
become the horse.
Okay. Very good, very good. Now we're on.
Professional.
We shall go on, and we're continuing our walk in the
Just
steps
as if it was a
of the Duke
professional
of Wellington.
documentary.
And we've made it to Hyde Park Corner with a few more Wellingtonisms, with, of course, Apsley House, home of the Duke of Wellington. We're going to talk a lot about the equestrian statue of the Duke of Wellington, and, of course, the gargantuan Wellington Arch.
This is pretty much what Wellington would have wanted if he got a Disneyland.
Okay.
This is Wellington Land.
Wellington Land.
This is the place, so to speak. Wellington bought that house over there from his brother. It wasn't originally built for him. And originally, this house formed part of a row of mansions that were quite similarly designed, that stretched all the way down Piccadilly in that direction. This road behind me was not there. However, those gates were. That was the entrance to Hyde Park. And it was called Number 1 London because out there was a frigid wilderness inhabited only by footpads and people taking a walk in the summertime, really. And the Duke of Wellington, being the brave man that he was, chose to have his house on the frontiers of London.
And you're right, this was Number 1 London, and on the other side was not London, a
No.
hive of scum and villainy.
No, this was the frontier, and just as he staved off tyranny with Napoleon, he staved off the worst elements who lived in the woods and spinneys.
Other people.
Other people.
Yes, non-noble people.
It had absolutely nothing to do with the fact that it was actually quite an easy carriage ride to Windsor from here, and that you could get also straight out into the countryside to Stratfield, say, in a matter of hours.
And he could get to the house.
Yes. He could just go visit the king down the road.
He could go to Parliament. Yeah, it was a very... He did well to situate himself right in the middle of affairs, and he inserted himself for the rest of his life into the ordnance, into the army, into
Victorian public consciousness.
all Victorian public life.
Wellington also liked a good party. Every year you had the Waterloo banquet, where gentlemen would ride up in their coaches and horses in style, if you were a general officer or related to a general officer, to have a banquet at Apsley House.
And I think the best things in Apsley House are the gifts. He received so many public gifts, and then you do actually get quite a bit of Napoleon memorabilia.
You do.
A surprising amount of Napoleon memorabilia.
Yes, absolutely. If you happen to look at the direction the Duke is facing on the statue, you can actually say he's looking at two naked men. One of them is the massive full-length Napoleon nude by Canova, I believe, which was a gift to him through the Prince Regent, and which he prominently displayed in the stairwell of Apsley House, so everybody had to pass it on their way upstairs. And he's actually, with his usual piercing gaze, steering straight through to the other equally massive and much more muscular Achilles statue, which was donated to him by the women of London for his fabulous victories against the French, made supposedly of melted French cannons.
Yes, yes. Yes, a glorious Achilles, a nude statue.
Now, funnily, an ambulance should suddenly arrive here because when the Duke's funeral procession came through here, it wound its way behind the camera, round this course here, and passed through the arch that stood over there, coming round in front of his old home on its route to his final resting place. Tickets were sold. It was a massive event. About 1 million people, I believe, turned out for it. And it all happened, this was one of the central moments of the procession. Prince Albert was in charge of the committee to create Wellington's funeral carriage. And the width of the arch behind me had to fit the enormous funeral carriage. Very somber metal construction that has all of his battle honours on it, and on the day it was draped with black mourning velvet and lots of his battle honours and pikes and muskets and sort of tableaus of arms. Although the actual service happened at St. Paul's, I think, isn't it? They had erected stands around here so the people could watch. And just the enormous cacophony of the bands playing the morning marches and the monotonous tread of military footsteps, the horses, the groaning of the gun carriage wheels, which exhausted the horses to the point that the sailors, I believe, had to and some of the soldiers possibly had to haul it a certain amount of the way. You can actually go and see it today at Stratfield Say. And if you can, and if you're a Wellington fan, what you should actually try and do is see Apsley House and then go out and see Stratfield Say. You can only do this in particular times in the summer because it's only open for a certain amount of weeks. But if you go and see them both, you can get a real sense of how he lived and a little bit of what he was like as a person. Really just expresses how important his life was to a lot of people, to the nation, and sort of how real it was when Victoria said that she couldn't imagine England without him. When he died, almost an entire era went with it. Even if he wasn't in real life, he was the man who took down the Republic. To the Victorians, that was who he was. And so this is a massively important monument. It's seen a lot of funerals since then as well, actually. It's formed an important part of many public events.
Even Her Late Majesty the Queen, they prepared the funeral caisson on the other side of the arch here, but Wellington's funeral as well.
Yes, it did. And sometime after, they removed what they considered an eyesore.
It was massive. It was unnecessarily large. It was the largest equestrian statue in the world at the time, I believe.
Yep.
And then they put on top the quadriga, which is
crowned with victory.
It's victory imposing peace on the world. That the quadriga, the war chariot, is being slowed down, and peace is being imposed on the world, which is very Wellington. So there's Apsley. Yes, step up. Step up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an extraordinary building. It's beautiful inside. Like I say, it has some of the most remarkable art from around Europe. And you can see a lot of portraits of Wellington's generals and his friends. And you can learn about his life by walking through it. Not so much his battles as his public life. I believe it's been conserved roughly by the 8th and 9th Dukes of Wellington, I believe, as the first Duke had it. And obviously they hold him in immense respect, and to them he is the Great Duke. He's not the Duke of Wellington. He's the Great Duke, as he was in Victorian times. It's fascinating to think how many interesting things happened inside that building that don't really get talked about. People know he lived there, but he met everybody. Everybody came to see him. Even actually goes back before him to when Richard Wellesley owned it and lived there. Richard Wellesley interviewed Simon Bolivar in Apsley House when he came over to ask for help for South American independence. And Simon Bolivar lost his temper in there, and Richard Wellesley was all awkward and said, well, we'll do what we can. Please go away. Wellington didn't have to deal with Simon Bolivar. He just had to dispense advice to all of his friends and try to run the country, which it didn't go quite as well as he would have liked, but somehow he was one of those public figures who managed to remain sometimes hated, But much as the house today was at the center of official life, really. What do you think of this?
This, I'm going to turn the camera around, but this is the equestrian statue of the Duke of Wellington, and Copenhagen is there, and I really like that all four countries are represented. The Welsh are represented by the Royal Welsh Fusiliers, with the sergeant with his spontoon, and then we have Ireland by the 6th Inniskilling, the dragoons, we have the cavalry represented, and then England and Scotland up here represented by the guards, so the guardsman in his bearskin on this side, and of course the 42nd Highlanders for the Scots. But my favorite detail is the fact that these were sculpted by a Frenchman, and funnily enough they didn't have a Brown Bess to model, and so ironically these are Charleville muskets.
Yep. Anybody care?
Terrible.
But if anybody cares,
Let's switch them out. Yes, somebody's coming. A motorcade.
And it would have been a cavalcade back in the Duke's
A
time.
cavalcade.
Often he just rode separately down to Buckingham Palace or to the house, but he never saw a need to go out accompanied, even though sometimes mobs would accost him in the park. And on one occasion, a Chelsea pensioner apparently took his arm to make sure that nobody hurt him. Or sometimes old soldiers would see him in the park and see him being followed by rough characters and walk alongside his horse. Everybody knew the Duke. Everybody knew the Duke when he was out riding, because he was a very courteous man and would often, if someone said hello, stop.
Whether you hated him or not.
Indeed. It's the gentlemanly thing to do.
No, he is a very divisive figure in this era.
Yes.
You know, there's a point where anyone that fought Napoleon, anyone that fought with Wellington can do no wrong. And so even he did well against Napoleon, so he must be very good at domestic politics.
Of course he
He must be. He must be. So
didn't turn out too well, but he
Yes,
was a leader there. He knew how to lead, and he couldn't quite get the hang of how to lead in politics is the problem. The statue has him dressed in his field's uniform, which is very fitting.
it's the best one.
Indeed. They didn't put him in his general's uniform, which he only wore for parades and things like that, which he supposedly didn't like. And so this is the blue frock coat, Hessian boots, cocked hat with all the cockades in it from the various sovereigns who had given him ranks.
Yes, because he's a British field marshal, he's a Dutch field marshal, he's a Spanish field marshal,
Spanish, Russian,
and an Austrian
Yeah.
field marshal.
Prussian too, I believe. Prussian prince, I think. Prince of Waterloo as well. And it's interesting, actually, in the 1820s, he went to Russia to solve the Greek question. And when he went, he was supposedly one of the last Russian field marshals alive.
That's amazing. But yes, he's wearing his garter star, and I can't see if he's wearing his golden fleece from the Spanish.
No, I can't see that either. But he did tend to wear it in quite a lot of portraits. Normally he would only wear the garter star, but you would often also see the fleece around his collar as well. Those are the two main orders he would wear. Partly because the Order of the Golden Fleece is incredibly rare to be given. It's one of the highest orders of chivalry in Europe, and not everybody...
Yeah, even monarchs don't always get it.
No.
But if you had your garter star, of course you'd wear it.
Of course.
So thus, we must present you. You know,
Indeed.
I'm always wearing my Order of the Cannon, and so thus I must present you with your Order of the Cannon for being on the channel. So
Thank you very much.
thank you for your Wellingtonian insights.
I'm very
Hopefully you enjoyed a little bit of this Hyde Park Cornering, this brief history of the Duke of Wellington, the Great Duke,
Great Duke.
the Great Duke, the Wellington Arch, the equestrian statue, and Apsley House.
Come
Worth
and see
a
it.
visit.
Come and see it.
Yes, and the horse blocks.
And the horse blocks.
Yes,
Start
yes.
with the horse blocks.
Start with the horse blocks. Very good. All right. Well, I am Daryl, known in genteel circles as the Lord Rivers. This is Lando of Adventures in Historyland, and this presently, is the Ministry for History.